street.
Come on.
Amen. That was awesome. You know we have a great worship team. Awesome group of servants we got, and just wanted to say that I really appreciated Sandy Guthrie offering her perspective. It's always inspiring when you see younger people just kind of able to see the big picture. And we actually have some special guests here this morning, people that have snuck back into Detroit. You know, it said that you can get people out of Detroit, but you can't get the Detroit out of people. Rio and Rachel Allen are here with us. You guys can stand up. Former campus students here, they graduated and then went off to become campus ministers in the Chicago church. And Rio is always trying to sneak back in. Rio is quite an athlete in this time here. He played college football. He would consistently lead the West region to beating us in football in that Turkey Bowl. But of course, I don't know if you guys know this, but he captained a softball team that had a perfect record. They didn't win a single game that year. And I feel it's very important for my relationship with Rio that I remind him of that. So that he stays humble. And the Lord. You know, it's said actually that when a city's sports team does well, that the actual city does well emotionally. That marriages actually do better when their sports teams are winning. That depression goes down. People, there's a pep in people's step, right? Well, I just thought about that. I was watching a basketball game yesterday between the Lakers and the Philadelphia 76ers last night with my middle son, Jaden. And I was watching it, and it just dawned on me that the Detroit Pistons aren't very good.
Oh, yeah.
They're not going to make the playoffs. Out of 32 teams, the Detroit Lions finished 30th last year. The Detroit Red Wings have by far the worst team in the NHL.
Oh, wow.
And last year, the Detroit Tigers were historically bad. We're the worst team in baseball. So if you're here this morning, it's because you love Jesus Christ. There is no questioning the authentic faith and the joy of the people of Detroit. You know what I'm saying? Like if you go to New England, or right now the Super Bowl next week is going to be between San Francisco and Kent. Like you're going to see happy people, but you can question whether it's really authentic. You know what I'm saying? Here, you know, we love Jesus Christ, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know, I just wanted to commend you guys on that. That despite our historically bad teams, that we are still in love with God. We are continuing on a series called Legacy. The definition of legacy is to pass something, is something you pass on to future generations, or you pay it forward. It's been passed on to you, you want to continue to pay it forward. And the hope of this particular topic, of this theme for this month, is that it would engage our hearts and our minds in questions that sort of force us to think spiritually. Also to kind of force our perspective to broaden, right? And to mature. I'm sure you'll agree with me that oftentimes the dumbest choices we make was when we were only thinking of ourselves.
Right. Oh, yeah.
We've all been guilty of being nearsighted and not being able to see the big picture. And so much of what the world forces on us is to think about what is your selfish impulse right now. And yet I think that just like Sandy offered us another perspective, not just to simply ask, why God, but to consider perhaps other perspectives. For us to stop thinking about maybe our 20 years of retirement and to think about the 20,000 years that kick off eternity. To stop thinking about maybe the few dollars that you're trying to save and instead start thinking about impacting a few lives around you. To stop making excuses for why things are the way they are in your life and to start making disciples. Amen. So I want us to consider the choices we make, and not just the choices and how they impact us, but their resonating impact for people around us. And there's one choice that all of us make. We make it every single day. You made it today, whether you knew it or not. And this often determines the type of legacy that we leave behind. And that is, you're going to choose to focus on what's important or what seems important.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to focus on what's important or what's... There's a lot of things in life that seem to be important. That you are told that you will forward to social media because it seems to be important. Things like your 401k, your dental care, your diet, your status, your title, your education, how many likes you get in social media. I wouldn't say inherently, if you're asking me, that any of these things are inherently unimportant. However, all these things need to be put in their proper context, right?
Oh, yeah.
3,000 years ago, there was a guy named Solomon. And his legacy, and what he was known for, was wisdom. When we talk about people that have wisdom, we're saying that they get life. People with wisdom, when you talk to them, they're able to take sometimes really cloudy and difficult issues and make them simple and straightforward, right? We admire people, and it's not really a function of age, although age typically, we think of wisdom as older people having it, but we've also seen that 12-year-old, that teenager, that college student that's able to make wise decisions. That's able to make decisions not in a vacuum, but able to make them seeing a broader context for life and for other people. And so this was Solomon's view about the things that you and I think are important, okay? He wrote a book, he wrote 3 books of the Bible, and one of them was Ecclesiastes. He says, meaningless, says the teacher. That was Solomon, the teacher of wisdom. Utterly meaningless, everything's meaningless. Sounds like he's having a bad day.
Oh, boy.
Here's something that we got to chew on for a bit this morning.
Mark.
The things that you and I think are important, things that you and I get upset about, things that you and I squabble about, things right now that you can't wait to get out of church because you got to do. He said they're meaningless.
Yeah.
I told you before, I don't think, if you're asking me, honestly, I think it's great. Dental care, yeah, I brush and floss, but he doesn't pull any punches. He just goes, hey, yeah, all that stuff, it's completely meaningless.
Oh, wow. Gee.
I don't know if you've ever had some event that just shifted your view or how you valued things. This month, I was at 2 funerals. Last month, I was at 3 funerals. And I'm sure all of us have been to a funeral. There's an undeniable power funerals have. One of them is to bring people together. Last year, my mom passed away on Mother's Day, and I shared that with the congregation. But one of the things that I was looking forward to is I knew at my mom's funeral I was going to get a chance to see family members that I hadn't seen in years. And not just see them, but for all of us to be together. And then, of course, and what's often said at funerals, there's many things that are typically said, but one of the things that people kind of comment on is, man, I don't want to wait this long for us to come together again.
Oh, yeah.
But you see, it's hard because all of us, we're busy. We're from literally different parts of the globe. I mean, my brother came all the way from the Middle East. We had people from Canada and America all come together for this funeral. But, the reality is it's not easy to just drop, our kid's soccer game or a work obligation, and then all of a sudden this funeral somehow has the power to bring certain perspective. Solomon notices, he said, it's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, for death is the destiny of everyone. Living should take this to heart. He's saying that there's a perspective that happens at a funeral that all of us should consider whether we're at one or not. In other words, the living should take this to heart, the reality that happens. There's a clarity that sometimes tragedy brings, that sometimes when you and I are kind of partying, that we just, sometimes the dumbest things we do is because we're having fun, we weren't thinking, and we're like, sorry, I just wasn't thinking. But there's a clarity he's talking about. And he's saying that death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. I mentioned earlier that the 2 teams in the Super Bowl are the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. They're going to play next week.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a big sports aficionado, and I'm a big fan. And so I was watching the Kansas City Chiefs 2 weeks play the Houston Texans. So my sons and I were locked into this game, and we're cheering for the Houston Texans. And the Houston Texans are up 24-0 early in the game.
Wow.
They're up 24-0, and they lost that game 51-31. My question to you is, which team would you rather be? Of course, it's an insulting question. Because you know that we would all rather be Kansas City Chiefs, because it's not how you start. It's the end that matters, right?
Right.
You've heard that saying, begin with the end in mind. We say that because it's the end that matters. Nobody here would choose to be the Houston Texans, because you and I both understand the end is what matters. If I were to give you two marriages, one that starts with a couple madly in love, they have a grandiose wedding and their attitude is, baby, you and I against the world.
Oh, man.
But they were ill-equipped for the realities of marriage. Conflict, money, raising kids, accountability. They end up embittered, separated, and divorced. Another couple gets married, both rough around the edges. He's such a guy, and she's such a girl. But they have one thing going for them. They're attached to community. They have older men and older women to step in and tell them the way things ought to be. In their older years, as they get older, they start to mentor other young marrieds. And the younger marrieds can't believe them when they tell them all the ways that they screwed up. But they become a model for these younger couples. Well, who would you rather be? We all know the answer. In fact, it's an insulting question because we intuitively, instinctively understand it's the end that matters. And this is what Solomon's saying. With your life, what matters at the end is what really matters.
That's the way to talk about that.
It's the end that matters. And he's saying, listen, death is the destiny, and you should consider an impact beyond yourself. How is it going to end? You know, it's one thing to want a legacy. It's another thing to understand the price of legacy. Like most things in life, we want a lot of things. If you're married, you want a great marriage.
Mm-hmm.
If you got children, hey, you want to raise a great kid that loves and fears God, that becomes an outstanding citizen, that contributes to society, is responsible. If you're single, possibly you want to date, or maybe not. If you're a teen, you want to go to great college. But what we don't lack is desire. What we often don't have is the willingness to pay the price for these things to come true.
Right.
We aren't willing to pay the price to have a great marriage. Maybe that means to get open and honest. We're not willing to pay the price to raise our children the way that God wants us to do it, to have accountability, to be invested in community. We just kind of want to do it our ways. There's a price. There's a price for legacy. And, you know, 3,000 years ago, Solomon noted this price. He said there was once, he's telling a small city, there's only a few people in it. And a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built huge siege works against it. Now there lived in that city a man, poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom. But nobody remembered that poor man. Here's the line that stands out to me. It's this. Nobody remembered that poor man. There's a price for you to have an impact beyond yourself. There's a price for you to set your mind on eternity. And that price is invisibility. That price is for you not to be recognized, you not to be noticed. And this is something that every one of us, our flesh, rails against.
Yeah.
I was in Chicago a couple months ago with my wife. We were at a church leaders meeting. We do this a couple times a year. We meet with about 25, 30 other church leaders. We gather together across the Midwest and a few from Canada. And we gather together to, kind of a continuing education. We hold each other accountable. There's lessons for each other. We kind of provide a counseling, if you will, for each other. But it's a great time of fellowship. It's a great time of personal growth.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a meeting that we were having lunch together, and it was a working lunch, and we were all staying at a hotel, and so our lunch was going to be at the hotel restaurant. And we had to fill out what we wanted for lunch earlier because they wanted it pre-ordered. So all of us filled out a sheet like, I want my burger, no fries, extra ketchup, or whatever you wanted on it. You fill out your name, Mark. You handed it in, and so when we came to lunch, there's probably maybe about 15 of us, just half of us having a meeting, and it was a working lunch. We had kind of a section of the restaurant, And the food started to come out, and it was the two waiters were Latino. They didn't speak English super well, and they were looking at this sheet, and they were trying to go like, they were like, Mark. And so I noticed it immediately. And for those of you that don't know, I grew up, my parents owned a restaurant. So I was kind of in my element. Hey, what's going on? Let me help. And I knew everyone's name. So I said, let me help out. And I was like, Mark, I got this. And so I'm delivering Tom. Okay, I got this. And, they're kind of like laughing at first, but they're pretty soon, kind of enjoying this whole shtick of me kind of, being delivered. I put on an apron, with them, just that kind of thing. And so I'm doing the whole thing, and it's great. And then, my friends, my fellow church leaders were laughing. The waiters are laughing, and we're just kind of all working together. We're passing this stuff along. I'm getting drinks for them all of a sudden. I'm like, where are the drinks? And I'm in my element. I love this. And something kind of funny happens along the way is there's a woman at another table, flags me down. Excuse me. Yes. Can I get some napkins? And I'm like, no problem, right? So everyone notices it, and it's just part of the shtick. Like, this is hilarious. It's super funny, right? And I'm just, I'm sort of, and I'm helping it on, and I'm getting along with these waiters. I learned their names. We're giving each other high fives and hugs. I'm doing it. But then the woman asked me again, excuse me. Can I get some water, please? And I'm like, yes. And so I'm getting water, but then I've got to, the game's over. I've got to sit down. I've got to eat, and I've got to be a part of this meeting and some friends. And so I sit down, and it's, again, later on, probably 15 minutes into the meal, that woman's like, excuse me, and she's asking me for more things. And I can tell she's annoyed with me. What? I'm annoyed that she's annoyed. Right? And I'm in a bit of a dilemma because I feel like I've gone too far to start telling her the whole story that I don't really work here. I was just like, what do you need? Because this is not what I asked. And so she's, and I'm not like, whatever. I'm like, okay. So I just go to the waiters. I'm like, hey, she didn't want to get what she wanted and all that stuff. And then I sit back down again, and she calls me again, and then the waiter says, no. He doesn't. And she's like, and you can just see like the look of like, it's like a cocktail of confusion and anger. And she's just trying to figure out what is going on with me sitting there. And he's just like, I'll take care of it. And then my buddy, he leans over. His name's Dave Jung. He leads a church in Winnipeg. He leans over to me while I'm eating, and he says, everybody loves to be a servant until you're treated like one, huh? It's a true statement, man. Everybody wants to be a servant until you're treated like one. Jesus tells a parable. He tells a parable about how you ought to view yourself. And he says, if you've done everything you've been asked to do, and it says in Luke 17, your attitude, if you've served, if you got up early, if we were ushering, if you're a music team, if you're preaching, if you were helping set up, here's how you ought to act. You're an unworthy servant. But that's hard because I don't want to not be remembered. You know what this old man did? This old poor guy, I don't even know his name. You know what he did? Here's his legacy. He saved his city.
Oh, wow.
But I can't tell you his name because he paid the price. He was willing to pay the price. You want to save your family? Want to have an impact on someone beyond you? Too many of us can't pay this. Excuse me, did you just do that to me? Did you not know who I am? Did you not see what I did? Do you know how many times I have served this church?
Come on, Mark.
Excuse me, I've been serving this church before you were born there, young fellow.
Oh, wow.
Nobody remember that more, man. That's the price of legacy. That's the price of legacy. I want to show you a video. It's about a 4-minute video. It's a video I showed on Mother's Day in Milwaukee when Ruth and I led the church there. But it kind of talks about this principle. So let's listen in.
All right.
It started to happen gradually. I would walk into a room and say something, and no one would notice. I would say, "Turn the TV down, please," and nothing would happen. So I would get louder. "Turn the TV down, please." Finally, I would have to go over and turn the TV down myself. And then I started to notice it elsewhere. My husband and I had been at a party for about 3 hours, and I was ready to go. I looked over, and he was talking to a friend from work, and I walked over, and he kept right on talking. He didn't even turn toward me. That's when I started to put it together. He can't see me. I'm invisible. I'm invisible. Then I started to notice it more and more. I would walk my son to school, and his teacher would say, "Jake, who's that with you?" And my son would say, "Nobody." Granted, he's just 5, but nobody? One night, a group of us gathered, and we were celebrating the return of a friend from England. Janice had just taken this fabulous trip, and she was going on and on about the hotel she stayed in. And I was sitting there looking around at the other women at the table. I put my makeup on in the car on the way there. I had on an old dress because it was the only thing clean, and I had my unwashed hair pulled up in a banana clip, and I was feeling pretty darn pathetic. And then Janice turned to me, and she said, "I brought you this." It was a book on the great cathedrals of Europe. I didn't understand. And then I read her inscription. She wrote, "With admiration for the greatness of what you are building when no one sees." You can't name the names of the people who built the great cathedrals. Over and over again, looking at these mammoth works, you scan down to find the names, and it says, builder, unknown, unknown, unknown. They completed things not knowing that anyone would notice. There's a story about one of the builders who was carving a tiny bird inside a beam that would be covered over by a roof. And someone came up to him and said, "Why are you spending so much time on something no one will ever see?" And it's reported that the builder replied, "Because God sees." They trusted that God saw everything. They gave their whole lives for a work, a mammoth work they would never see finished. They showed up day after day. Some of these cathedrals took over 100 years to build. That was more than one working man's lifetime. Day after day. And they made personal sacrifices for no credit. Showing up at a job they would never see finished, for a building their name would never be on. One writer even goes so far as to say no great cathedrals will ever be built again, because so few people are willing to sacrifice to that degree. I closed the book, and it was as if I heard God say, "I see you. You are not invisible to me. No sacrifice is too small for me to notice. I see every cupcake baked, every sequin sewn on, and I smile over every one. I see every tear of disappointment when things don't go the way you want them to go. But remember, you are building a great cathedral. It will not be finished in your lifetime, and sadly, you will never get to live there. But if you build it well, I will." At times, my invisibility has felt like an affliction to me. But it is not a disease that is erasing my life. It is the cure for the disease of self-centeredness. It is the antidote to my own pride. It's okay that they don't see. It's okay that they don't know. I don't want my son to tell the friend he's bringing home from college, "You're not going to believe what my mom does. She gets up at 4 in the morning and she bakes pies and hand-bakes a turkey and she presses all the linens." Even if I do all those things, I don't want him to say that. I want him to want to come home. And secondly, I want him to say to his friend, "You're going to love it there." It's okay that they don't see. We don't work for them. We work for him. We sacrifice for him. They will never see, not if we do it right, not if we do it well. Let's pray that our work will stand as a monument to an even greater God.
Amen to that.
They won't see, not if we do it well.
Right.
You want a great marriage? You don't know the work that goes into a great marriage, and you never will. Because when it's done right, there's so much hidden sacrifice in building. Want a great church, great faith, want a great legacy. If you're trying to be seen, it's probably the wrong place for you. It's the wrong place for you.
Come on.
You can tell how great an endeavor someone's taking by their willingness and the size of their sacrifice. The biggest sacrifice most of us will have to make is our own ego. You'll choose to see the important or to be seen as important. To see the important or to be seen as important. This is a choice that we make instinctively or deliberately. But everyone makes this choice. Everyone lives according to this choice. To see what's really important or to be seen as important. Let's look at how Solomon closes off. He spoke in Ecclesiastes 12 chapters. Let's look at the 12th chapter. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge. In other words, that was his legacy. To give, to impart, is to leave a legacy. And he imparted knowledge, wisdom to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. For this is the duty of all mankind. I want to challenge us this morning to broaden our perspective. To question the impulses that come out of your hearts. To challenge it. And to ask yourself, rather than just to give in to my impulse to minimize, to refuse God's word, maybe to consider that in God's eyes the things that you think are important are in fact meaningless. To be willing to pay the price of anonymity, and maybe even in your lifetime to not see the fruit of it, but to know that you are part of building something great.
Oh, yeah.
A legacy created by God. To embrace this truth that if you do it right, no one will tell. That if you do it right, no one will tell. You will choose to use wisdom or refuse wisdom. You were all given something this morning. Words of a guy that lived 3,000 years ago and left a legacy of wisdom. A guy that was wealthy, a guy that had it all, and when he had it all and had all the things that, typically we want, he said, let me tell you what's actually important in life. And he said, too many people aren't willing to be invisible. And too many people don't understand this, that life's about God, you and God.
Oh, yeah.
It's the end that matters. It doesn't matter how you start in a blaze of glory. It matters what the score is at the end. That's what matters. When I was growing up in a restaurant, my mom one time said, hey, one day, learn this. One day you'll take over. And that one line changed my perspective of all the work that she made me do.
Oh, wow.
I no longer just saw it as labor. I thought, hey, this is me being the future owner of this place. Of course, that never came to fruition, thankfully.
Oh, wow. Gee,
But the point is, it's amazing what just a seed of perspective can do and how it can change all of us. That's the power of the Scriptures. That's the power of God. And that's the power of us engaging in this thought of what is my legacy? What is our legacy? And how will we continue to carry on God's legacy? If you're visiting this morning, this is your first time, I hope you're encouraged. I hope Man, the singing was just, wow. I hope you enjoyed singing the young people up here and the old people together. I hope you see that we're family. I want to encourage you to study the Bible. Don't take my word for these things. This is not a church that thinks that I'm just this holy guy. We're a church that loves God's word, and that's what we want to follow, and that's what binds us together. So I want to encourage you. If you want to get close to God because of something you've heard or maybe part of the singing, then my encouragement is to study the Bible. Amen?
Amen.
Let's have a prayer. God in heaven, thank you so much for the legacy that you've left for us.
Yes.
And I pray that for all of us, we can choose to focus on not what seems important, but what actually is important. What actually matters. Not the things that in 5 and 10 years we'll be like, oh man, why did I spend so much time on that? But Father, I pray that we can focus on the things that we're going to be in 5, 10 years saying, I'm so grateful that I got perspective on what was important. I pray for all of us to be willing to pay the price of invisibility. In other words, that God, we don't have to be recognized because we believe that you see, and that's what matters. I pray that we can use the wisdom that you give us, apply it to our lives, not just go, oh, that was a nice lesson, but God, I pray that your word will truly hit our hearts in a way that draws us closer to you. Help us to be concerned about what you think and not what people think, God, so that we can draw closer to you. We lift our hearts to you and we thank you. We pray all this in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Church, we're all dismissed. Parents, please pick up your children.